We are Travis and Adelle Graham with The Noble Marriage, and we wanted to share with you a story from brokenness to restoration in our marriage.
We had the privilege of being interviewed by Focus on the Family. Our prayer is that through watching our story, that you hear something new for yourself and that you get healing and restoration in your life and in your marriage.
Hey, and welcome back to part 7 of our story, From Brokenness to Restoration. And while we are so grateful that you're choosing to watch each one of our stories, this has been the most engagement we've gotten out of any of the material that we've put on YouTube. And it's been such a blessing for us to hear your comments for the comments of saying, hey, this really made a difference for me, or I really saw myself in this part of your story, and I could really find hope in this. It's just been such a blessing for us to be able to hear what you have to say and how our story, our brokenness, has been able to help give you hope through the restoration that we're having.
It's been very inspiring to us. Those of you that have reached out on social media and shared your story with us, our hearts just are so inspired to hear your story and to hear how our story is making a difference for you. So we just have so much gratitude for all of you out there that are watching this story and participating and engaging with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, your stories are so important. We want to hear those. Keep sharing them with us. Keep sharing how this has impacted you. We want to know what hope you're finding out of this. Thanks for sharing it with us.
If you're just joining us, you're going to want to go back and start at part 1 because this is part 7. And in this video alone, we talk so much about the healing and the restoration that began at the Hope Restored Intensive that we went to in 2018. It's really what kick-started our healing, and we just didn't stop from there. So we're going to talk about a lot of things in this video. And then after the interview portion, Travis and I are going to take a deep dive into what does it really look like to be a whole and complete person? And how do we have that inside of a marriage? So be sure and join us for that part of the conversation after the interview.
That's a good point, that healing is in the conversation. It's in sharing, getting the things out that are there in a safe place where the other person's not judging and just listening and affirming that healing took place in both of our lives. Remember those wallet cards that they gave us? Those were pivotal for me because I needed something to refer to. And then when we would be in the middle of the argument, one of us was smart enough to take a pause, but I would go immediately to those cards and read it and be like, okay, what are my steps? What are the things I need to do? Because I want to go build up my own argument during a pause. Yeah, I want to build up a case because I want to be right. And I go to those cards and read like, oh, so next is prayer. And next is taking responsibility and taking care of my heart. And, none of those are building my case. And so just that one thing has been so pivotal because anytime we go into an argument, it's like 2 7-year-olds having a fight and it's not productive. But as soon as we took a pause, look at that card and like, okay, here's some steps I can do. And it allowed me to be able to be, 15, 20 minutes, come back and say, okay, let's try this again. Let's try having a conversation again. And it worked. Most of the time it would work. And then there's times where we're like, oh, maybe we should do a little better next time. But that's it right there, right? Is repeating over and over and over, sticking with it and not going back to our old way of just shoving things under the rug.
I think something else we really got at the intensive is that we're normal. The things that we argued about, the cycle we would get in, the fears that we have in our heart, everybody else has them too. And for the first time, I felt like, oh my gosh, we're not the oddballs because we were around other couples who were sharing their stories and how even though it was a different story, they were the same roots. And that was just so awesome for me to see because it gave me so much more hope in knowing that because, we're not the only ones dealing with this and we're not the only ones who have worked through it. That we knew we could do it, but we also knew it had to become a lifestyle for us. And so we just really made it a lifestyle. And after our 3-month really sabbatical in the house of healing and restoration, God was still stripping away the things that I held most important to me. And the salon being one of them. And I couldn't see it at the time. I was just very like, God, what are you doing with our business? Because after my second surgery, I couldn't work behind the chair anymore. And that meant that I had to develop a new role as a leader for myself with my team. I'm no longer working with them. I'm working differently. And that was so important because the next year we really started diving into personal development of like, what is our purpose in life? Why are we here? God, what do you have for us? And he really showed us it had nothing to do with what we were doing and everything to do with who we're being in life.
I learned that I needed to be a whole and complete person first in our relationship, because I was showing up expecting you to complete me.
Yes.
And
I was doing
you
the same.
disappointed me every time. And I learned that I need to love myself. Earlier I said that I didn't love myself. I learned the importance that if I am to follow what Jesus said, that is the love God with everything I have and love my neighbor as myself. I learned that if I don't love myself, how can I love my neighbor and how can I love God effectively? And you're my neighbor in that scenario. And so when I learned how to take care of myself as a whole and complete person through Christ, and then once I have that ability, now I can enter into our relationship and have a great, successful marriage, as opposed to expecting you to complete me in some way. The second thing that was really impactful for me is I learned that I have a huge fear of failure. And that fear of failure is so crippling to me. And I fear that people judge me. And those two things are probably the biggest things I have that will stop me from being effective. It's like when you talk to me or you're asking me a question, you're curious and asking me a question, but I hear judgment. And so my response back to you would always shut you down, because I would hear you speaking or asking some type of question. Questioning me, not asking me a question, questioning me.
Yeah.
And that would always shut me down. So learning those two things were really pivotal. I am my own person, the whole complete person. And I learned that those fears are not from you. They are from my past. And I just learned how to put horns on those, that is from the enemy. That is not from God. And there were things that I have, and we all have things from our past that creates different fears in our lives. And those fears keep us ineffective if we don't really look at them as they're not true.
We got sent home with a workbook of things to really, like a chapter a day, or was it a chapter a week?
It's a 15-week course that Focus on the Family creates for after an intensive. And wow. That was amazing.
It really was, because it took each and every tool and expanded it to really understand it in real life circumstances, which is, we needed that, because it was like drinking from a fire hose and letting all that soak in. And so I remember when we had that first disagreement, and it was over something minor. I literally asked him, how long do you think you need to do something? And he heard me judging that he was doing something. And we entered into our cycle. It's the fear cycle. And we saw it. I was like, it's happening. It's happening right now. Because it was the first time that we were actually able to see what they taught in real life. And I remembered like feeling panicky. I felt like a little bit of fear of, are we going to actually be able to work through this? Because we never have been able to before. Right. And seeing you show up different and then me showing up different allowed for this new space to actually allow us to work through it.
Yes.
We weren't in that space before. We didn't know how to allow those things to work and talk through things and communicate about those things. It was just a lack of communication. And so we actually had communication about that one little thing We recognized it and it was over. And I was like, things like that would have, it would have ruined the rest of the day
It would have.
before. And it gave like everything that we learned life.
What I saw is there's a completely new way of living. And I don't know if you feel this way, but every time we have an opportunity to work through a disagreement, I feel closer to you.
Yeah.
I feel more connected to you. I feel deeper, richer love for you. Every time that we have an opportunity to work through some type of disagreement, it enriches who we are in our relationship. Whereas in the past, it would be, let's shove it under the rug, and then we'll always go back and have a different type of argument, and that kind of stuff just kind of surfaces up.
Right.
So there were several things that we talked about that we got out of Focus on the Family, Hope Restored Intensive. There were so many things that I personally learned. Personal responsibility, being whole and complete, that I have these fears going on for me. All of these things I had no idea were running in the background of my life. No clue.
Yeah. And for me, I really realized that we're not alone. That every human being on this planet deals with the same things that Travis and I deal with. And that's where we really got inspired to someday make a difference for other people by what God was implanting in our hearts.
That's good. There's 7.5 billion people on this planet, and we're all going through different things. And that's one of the biggest things that impacted me, is knowing that I wasn't alone, the knowing that other people experience something similar to what I experienced. And I don't know about you guys, but I used to think I am so alone in life. No one knows what I experienced. No one knows the pain I experienced or the impact that I've had happen on my life. And I just figured I was alone in this. I was weird, or something was wrong with me. That's the way I experienced life. But really, I know that this is normal, because we live in a fallen world where Satan just wants to tell us lies and keep us down.
Yeah, and so that is the approach that we take with our teachings, is that in order to have a really great marriage, at the root, I have to be a whole and complete person. And so when we work with marriages, it's a lot of individual work, because if I'm showing up incomplete to this marriage, it means that I am looking to you to complete me somehow. And anytime I'm looking for you to make me happy, you to make me feel better, or I am looking for something in you to complete me, I'm left feeling even more incomplete and broken.
Now, I try to. If you expect me to try to complete you, I try to complete you.
We tried that for 12 years.
And I have no idea I don't know how to take care of your heart.
Right.
But I'll try. And each time I'm going to leave you so disappointed. So disappointed. And you leave me disappointed. You never were able to complete me.
Right. So where do we get our completeness from?
That's a great question. I love to talk about the cross of Jesus. You know, Jesus was died for our sins on the cross. And I like to use the analogy of the cross because there's a vertical line in the cross, and it's a horizontal line that's held up by the vertical line. And when I talk about being a whole and complete person, I want to go backwards first to Genesis 1, 26 and 27, and Genesis 5:1. And it says, God says who he made us as. We are made in his image. We are whole and complete people. Now, Genesis 3 changed things. That's when sin entered the picture. That's when Adam and Eve ran out and put fig leaves on and started hiding. And you know what I would like to introduce, or like for you to consider, we're still putting fig leaves on. We're still putting these things on to not be, to hide ourselves, or to hide where I feel incomplete as a person. And so what I really have to get connected to is there's nothing missing other than God. And so like Adam and Eve in Genesis 3, they sinned and they went and hid themselves, put on fig leaves, but God came chasing after them, just like he comes chasing after us. And they choose to put fig leaves on, and they continue to do that. But here's what's really cool is when I have that vertical relationship, going back to the cross, when I have that vertical relationship right, and I fill that void up that I have in my life with God, and he tells me who I am and whose I am, and my identity is in him, just like he created me to be, then I am a whole and complete person because he makes me whole and complete in that relationship. And when I have that relationship right, the horizontal relationships, the other part of the cross, just works out. That's my relationships with my wife, my kids, my family, my coworkers, my community, my church, my neighbors. All that kind of works out the right way. And I really believe Jesus summed it up whenever the Pharisees came up to him and said, hey, there's 613 commandments. What's the most important? And they're trying to trap him, but I love Jesus and I love what he says. He goes back to Deuteronomy and he says that the number one commandment can be summed up in this: love God with everything you have, mind, body, soul. And then the second is just as important as the first, is love your neighbor as yourself. And I really need to start at the back of that. I need to love myself. I need to know that I am God's chosen son. And you are too. You're God's chosen son and daughter. That's who I am. I got to have a good foundation of who I am. And I need to love myself so that I can love you, so that I can love my neighbors. My neighbor is anyone other than me. And then I love God. And I can do that when I have that vertical relationship right. The horizontal just works out. And I can become a whole and complete person the way that God created me to be.
And you may be saying, how do I love myself when I've done some things I'm not proud of and I don't really like myself? Well, for me, in the intensive, when I got to realize and discover for myself that my brokenness was the enemy's plan, that it's not that I am broken. God made me to be whole and complete. It's that I picked things up over my life. We call these thorns. I picked up these thorns over my life that made me incomplete, that made me see life through a distorted filter or a distorted lens. And so I really started to love myself and my brokenness, and that having grace for myself and what I've been through in my life really started to allow me to love who I am. Because now I actually had a way of moving forward, is letting those things go. Once I have awareness around what are the things that are keeping me ineffective in this marriage. For me, my biggest thorn was I'm not good enough and people betray me. And that happened in our marriage. I was not good enough and I was betrayed. And so those thorns, they hit so deep for me. And yet I had to really start to love the fact that, okay, this is who I am based on my past, but I don't have to stay this way. And so I started letting those things go. I started shedding off the old me and really having awareness around those thorns that would show up in my life in between my relationship so that I could silence those, look to God for the healing, and allow myself to become whole and complete. Because I think just as much as not allowing myself to have a good connected relationship, I also don't allow myself to be whole and complete. Yeah. Instead, I have to actually make that choice to do that. And it takes intentional work.
That's good.
I think we have said that multiple times, that how Travis and I got to be where we are did not happen by accident. This is not something that marriage ministry fell into our laps and healing was rapid.
Right.
We had to walk that journey. We had to be intentional about our growth. And for us, going to the intensive, we had an outlook that we are going to get everything that we paid for. It costs a lot of money to do something like that. And it was hard for us to put that money towards that. But we were determined to get everything that was available.
That's good.
And then we didn't stop. We continued to practice those tools and make it a lifestyle. And then add on new tools, because we were out there trying to discover more about what we learned.
We were.
And the Lord opened up this huge ability for us to discover more about the brain and the body and how it all works together and how He designed us to be and the life He has created for us and how things just get in the way of that. And so that is what's led us to where we are today, is continued intentional work. And we still do it. It doesn't stop.
Yeah, it hasn't stopped. I love what you said about when we paid money to go to an intensive, and it costs money to go to an intensive. It costs money to really do almost anything in this world. But what I loved about what you said is we said, let's get what we pay for. We're paying for it. We're doing it. We might as well get out of it what we're put into it. And we've experienced that all through our life, is we might as well get what we're there to get. If we're going through a course, if we're taking some type of leadership course, or we're taking some type of development, or we're learning something, You and I have shifted our mindset to where we're going to get everything out of this that we can. We might as well get what we pay for. And that brings me to Jesus. Going back to that cross. We might as well get what he paid for.
Right.
He paid for us not to have to be like Adam and Eve and still running through the woods putting fig leaves on.
Hiding in shame.
We don't have to do that anymore. We can actually get what he paid for. He died on that cross for a purpose. And that is to make you whole and complete again in God, because that's who you are. That's who I am. That's who we are. We might as well get what he paid for.
Yeah, that's good. So what are your next steps? Maybe you've recognized that your relationship, your marriage is currently not working. There's disconnection. There's a lack of intimacy. What do you need to do to invest in you and invest in the relationship that you're meant to have for life? What is that next step? Maybe it's an intensive. Maybe it's a counselor. Maybe it's a mentor. Maybe it's taking one of our courses, reaching out for coaching. I don't know what that next step is, but I want to encourage you, be intentional. Be intentional with your life and with your marriage, because I can promise you, things don't just get better with time. They actually get worse.
Yeah.
Things magnify. And, I heard this quote a couple weeks ago, conflict avoided is conflict delayed and magnified. And it's so true. It's the same thing with anything in marriage. When we avoid it, it's delayed and magnified. And so I encourage you, take that next step today.
So if you've stuck with us to the end of this video, which we're so grateful for, I have a special request for you. You are part of our tribe. If you're watching these videos to the end, it really is making a difference for you. And we are so grateful that you've chosen to stick around and hang out with us and be part of our tribe. And my special request is share it. Share it with someone, share it on social media, text it to a friend that really could use some encouragement, and you'll know who that is. Something will be laid on your heart. Hey, this person really could use some encouragement. This person really could use some hope and they feel hopeless. And I just request that you would share this with them. Share this series with them to get hope and healing and restoration from brokenness.
And join us next week for part 8 as we unfold more of our journey of healing. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.